I'd like to share with you some of the mystical experiences I've had in my life. I believe that these are available to all of us. Most of the experiences I've had came during very low times. They weren't the result of extensive meditation or enlightened thought. They came in the dark times. They came in times when I gave up, in times of illness, and in times of real struggle. But I think they're very important, and I think they're interesting to share. Probably my first memory of anything mystical was as a child. I would have these very strange dreams where I was very, very small and then very expansive and then very small again. And like I was all one with the universe and yet nothing at all. And I can't explain it at all, except that it always had a little seed inside of me that the world is not what we think it is. It is not so simple. And even as a young child, every so often I would remember these dreams and look around me and go, things are more interesting than we think. When I was about 28, I met Jim, and he's the teacher that I talk about in my books, What If You Could Skip the Cancer and Tantric Intimacy. Truly my first teacher, the first person I ever met who, if he had told me that he was 500 years old, I would have believed him. And looking into his eyes, and he would kind of look back at me, and he would smile, and it's like he was smiling through all of the nonsense I was telling myself about my life and if I was happy and all the theories I had, and he would just sort of look at me, not with judgment. It's like he just saw me and he was almost entertained by the stories I was telling because they weren't true. I was definitely trying to convince myself of a reality that just wasn't there. And I remember him looking at me like that and looking right into my soul. And maybe that was one of the first times I ever saw my soul. Having someone actually see you for the first time. That's quite a moment. The definition of a mystical moment to me is those times when you just become still and you know something deeply. There's no real words for it, but looking into his eyes for the first time was one of those moments that stopped me in my tracks, and you're never quite the same again. During the course of my healing experience with Jim, our sessions had a real mystical quality to them. And not because, we imagine mystical experiences being, these angelic experiences where, time sort of stops or something, which is true in some ways. But my sessions with him were so unique because he was genuinely answering the questions of my soul. The content of the sessions isn't important. What was important is, as a teacher, he was responding to exactly what I desired and to exactly what I needed in my path. And it's a very incredible experience for someone to connect with you and answer your questions, your deepest questions. And sometimes we don't even know what those questions are. I remember one time I was sitting with him and I was upset about something and complaining and I was exhausted and he just sort of looked at me with these eyes or this sight. And suddenly he ran upstairs and he came down and he had all of these geometric shapes. And they were all the Platonic solids. And the Platonic solids are the foundations of the universe. They're how we are created, how everything in the universe is created, how energy transforms into matter. And he sat there showing me these Platonic solids and how they unfolded into the Kabbalah tree and how everything linked together and how resonance worked, and he just sort of did this. I don't want to say he mesmerized me, but he just spoke almost to my soul through these solids. And again, learning about the solids, I mean, we can Google it and learn all kinds of things, but the point was, he was answering my soul's question. And my soul's question was, do I have to keep trying so hard? What if I just relaxed? Would the world fall apart? And his answer was, the world is perfect. It's so far beyond us. We may as well just enjoy the ride. And in those moments when we get an answer like that, everything changes. It's like we fully plug into the universe. The next experience was when the breast lumps actually left my body. And if you haven't read my book, the breast lumps were just below the nipple and they were moving out. And they were about this far out past the nipple and past the skin. And I was in a lot of pain. It was a very, very difficult time. And I was standing in the shower, and all of a sudden, they just, like a pinprick, just opened. And it's kind of gross, but it just started coursing blood and pus and fluid out of my body. And it actually filled the tub like this thick. I didn't know that at the time, because the second it opened, I just went into this state. I guess nirvana or bliss state. And time disappeared and I just sort of floated. And I had no awareness of time. But the words, the grace of God, by the grace of God, by the grace of God. And I don't even know if it was repeating as much as those were the words in my mind and time wasn't passing. And I don't know, it was very curious. Well, it was very beautiful. Afterwards, when I came out of that state, I realized I'd been standing there for 3 hours. I had no idea. All I knew is I felt this incredible warmth, kindness, love, just this floating bliss. I kind of never thought I could ever be unhappy again or ever worry again. And it lasted for a while. And then slowly I reconnected to my worries, but it was quite a moment. A few years later, after the lumps were gone and I was healed and everything was great, life still continued. You know, we had a dairy farm, we had children, we'd had foster kids, we worked long hours on the farm. And, you know, I always wondered why I ended up marrying a farmer. I was a city girl, a computer programmer, and I fell in love with a farmer, moved to the middle of nowhere, and worked really, really hard, really long days that seemed to have nothing to do with my gifts. And I don't know if this is true, but one thing that really happened was it really beat me down in a lot of ways. It really caused a lot of depression. It was very isolating on the farm and very exhausting. And one day, you know, my kids were maybe 8 and 10 or something like that. And they were arguing and fighting, and things were tough on the farm. We were tired, and who knows, the hay got rained on and a cow fell down. I don't know, but it was a tough day. And something in me just gave up. I don't know. It's that moment when you just snap inside and you're like, I'm done. I have no more answers. I have no more wisdom. I have no more strength. I give. And I walked outside of the house and we had this wraparound deck. And I sat down on the deck and I just looked out at this maple tree on the lane. And I kind of looked at the sky and I said, I give up. I don't know what to do anymore. And suddenly it was like this shower of rain, of cool rain came down over me. And I don't know if I left my body or I just floated in this incredible, blissful state. And in some ways it kind of felt like those scenes from the Matrix, when you kind of have all these numbers or something floating down through the waterfall. But it was really incredible because it's like you could feel everything, you could hear everything, you knew everything. And I floated there for the longest time, and it was so beautiful until all of a sudden I was aware that there was someone sitting behind me, and my husband had come out and sat in the chair behind me with a beer and very innocently said, "So, what are you doing?" And I couldn't say anything. It was kind of like that, when you try to scream when you're having a nightmare and there's no voice because you're not actually in your body. And I realized I had to come back into my body. And as I came back in, tears just flowed out of my eyes. And I said to my husband, "I'm somewhere else right now, and I don't know how to walk between these worlds." And then I re-entered, I guess, and I was pretty confused for a while. But sometimes I imagine if that's when my big ask came, that I asked, how do you walk between these worlds? How do you bring them together? Because it wouldn't have been too long after that the word Tantra bubbled up inside of me one night lying in bed, which began my journey into the study of Tantra. My next experience was in Jamaica. It's an experience I talk about in my book, Tantric Intimacy. And I'd already been studying Tantra for a while, and I now wanted to explore it in intimacy with my husband. And at one point during this intimacy, I was on top, and this energy suddenly shot up through me, just like this white light went up through me. And I just sort of sat there and just vibrated like we were in the middle of making love. And luckily, my husband was used to weird stuff happening by this time. And he, flowed with it. And in that moment, it almost felt like there was this cone around me. And when it was complete, a complete knowledge or something had become part of me. And this is when I understood what Tantra was all about and what it was I needed to teach. And it would be a while yet before I understood how it actually lands on the earth. But it was a very life-changing moment. But again, there was a real integration process needed because it just floats in the ethers. It's just out there. It doesn't come like a novel. So it took quite a few years to actually ground a lot of it, and it's still integrating. Every experience I have has, not every experience, but there are experiences that I still have that suddenly go, oh, now I know how that fits. The last experience I'd like to share, it actually came out of a book called Aphrodite's Daughters. And she tells a story about this nun who would go to bed every night and she would lie in her little cot and she would lie perfectly still, waiting for God to come and make love to her. And there was something about that story that stuck with me. So a few years ago, after I'd been teaching Tantra for a while and all these experiences had come to me, I laid on my bed one night and I laid perfectly still. And I asked for God to come to me and make love to me. And it was a fascinating time because it was listening within, and the answers were just surrender, release, allow the energy to come in. And I did. And my body went into this orgasmic state. And not like an ejaculatory, orgasmic shaking and screaming, not like that. A blissful, orgasmic state. It's a really, really beautiful experience. And it's something I can replicate when I'm in the right frame of mind. It doesn't always work, but it's something that I believe is actually really possible for everyone. I actually made 2 meditations on Insight Timer. They're free meditations to listen to I think they're called Merging with the Divine. And I take you through that process because I think it's there for all of us to experience. So the question is, how has this really changed my world? How has this integrated into my life? The number one thing is that I really see beauty and joy in the smallest things. I'm making this video staying at a friend of mine, this place who lives on the ocean. And so I get to watch all the people walk their dogs along the ocean and watching the joy of dogs running along and playing together and running in the water. Oh, I just get so excited. I get so happy about these little things, or seeing the leaves on the trees, or birds, or like really simple things, and obviously things like making love and being with someone, or being with a friend, or being with my children. It's almost overwhelming how happy that makes me. The second thing is, it gives me great courage when things are difficult. Because I really like this world. I love being fully in this world. I don't believe that enlightenment or ascension is all about leaving this physical world and not having growth and challenges and problems. I think we're supposed to have sad times and difficult times because it means that we're on the cusp of something new. And what this does is it gives me courage to dive in. And if I'm sad, I cry, and if I'm angry, then I get angry. And I know that there's more going on in the world than how I'm feeling right now. So it is safe to go all in. And I know that on the other side of this emotion is what I'm looking for. So, if you know me, you'll know that, I can be very, very happy. And if I'm sad, I'm going to cry. And if I get angry, I'm going to be angry. And it's beautiful. I think it's awesome. I'm not mean to anyone or unkind, but to have the freedom to just dive into exactly how you're feeling and have the courage to know that nothing's too scary. I think that's a huge deal. And I think the other big thing, the last thing that it's really done for me, is that when we want to stop controlling the world with our mind, and we want to have faith and we want to trust in something bigger, we want to connect with this infinite, expansive part of ourselves, part of the world, it means surrendering the ego, however you understand that, and trusting in something that we cannot see. And we can't describe it. We can't explain it to anyone. The only thing we can do is feel it. And when we've had these feelings, it becomes like a visceral memory inside of us. And we can trust that feeling. We can trust that memory in our heart, even if our mind can't describe it, even if we can't find words to describe it, or a label that makes anyone happy, And I mean that in that if I was to say that I trust God, that label is a very dangerous dangerous word, because it means different things to different people. And if I say consciousness or, non-physical reality, none of them really add up to what we feel, right? So I think this is the greatest thing, that as I walk through my day, I have lots of moments where I wonder, am I crazy? And, but then you have this feeling, and you're part of this great web, this great experience, and it'll all be fine. So thank you for letting me share this with you.